Welcome to the shading section of the Art and Science of Drawing series. Shading is one of the most important skills you can learn as an artist or a designer. All kinds of creative individuals use shading in their work. Now in this series we're going to be focusing on drawing, but learning how to shade in a drawing is a foundational skill that you can apply to numerous other kinds of creative endeavors, including fashion design, architecture, character development for either video games or comic books, and of course, painting and fine arts. Now, if you're new to the Art and Science of Drawing series, here's how it works. Every day, you're going to watch a video lesson, and every lesson contains a demonstration drawing. At the end of each lesson, you'll be given a specific project to do on your own. Once you've completed the recommended practice, you're ready to watch the next lesson. The Art and Science of Drawing series is designed to streamline your learning process as an artist. It's organized to give you the right information at the right time. And every project is designed so that you can practice the most powerful tools and concepts and make the drawing process accessible at every step of the way, whether you're a beginner who's starting off at the very beginning of the series, or a more seasoned artist who's decided to jump into the series at the topic that they are most interested in. Almost everything you're going to learn in this shading course is based on the idea that all form, no matter how complex, simplifies down into just a few basic volumes. By understanding how to draw and shade these foundational volumes, you'll be able to draw and shade any object, whether observed or imagined. By the end of this course, you will have a deep understanding of how each of the foundational volumes operates in light and how to combine them to create more complex forms. This course is going to break the shading process down into a series of easy-to-understand steps. In every lesson, you're going to be introduced to a critical shading concept, and every lesson will build on the next, so by the end of the shading course, you'll have moved through the most basic ideas of light logic and shading to being able to render complex form. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's get started by talking about how light actually works. To illustrate why it's so important that you understand how light works, indulge me in a thought experiment. Imagine yourself in a pitch-black room. You know that this room contains people and objects, but the room is so dark you can see no evidence of them. Imagine what it would be like to walk around this room. Although the darkness would keep the objects hidden from your view, they would still maintain all of their form and physical properties. While attempting to navigate the room, you would likely come into contact with the people and objects within it. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. But in the darkness, there's nothing to draw or paint. To be able to see the objects and occupants of the room in order to draw and paint them, we need light. Now, imagine lighting a single candle in this room. Light would begin streaming out from the flame of the candle in all directions, illuminating any surface directly in its path. The objects closest to the candle would appear brightest. The objects further away would appear dimmer. Any surface not directly in the path of the candle's light, either because it was facing away from the light or blocked by another object, would remain in darkness. The location, color, and intensity of the candle's light determine everything we see and don't see in this image. What this means is that when we draw and paint, we are not drawing and painting the objects themselves. Instead, we are drawing and painting the impact of light on these objects. Light and shadow are the critical elements that will allow us to describe all of the form and volume of our subjects. The look and feel of everything you draw and paint will be determined by its interaction with light. For centuries, artists have understood that light coming from a single light source best describes form and volume. In painting after painting and drawing after drawing, we see light shining diagonally down on the subject. The light may come from the right or the left, but it is almost always coming from a single light source that is coming from above, off to one side, and from the front. With the subject positioned this way in the light, you can see that 2/3 to 3/4 of the subject is in the light, while 1/3 to 1/4 of the subject is in shadow. This creates a dramatic and descriptive lighting scheme, and one that you're going to learn how to create and draw in this course. You'll see this lighting scheme used over and over again on both single subjects, like the portrait of an individual, as well as for more complex compositions containing multiple subjects. Historically, a single light source was achieved by controlling and directing natural light through a window. Many artists still use this technique, but to give us more control over our light source, I'll be doing all lighting demonstrations using a lamp that I can easily move around our drawing subjects to create different lighting effects. This is a simple diagram of a sphere sitting on a table lit by a single light source. Just like we saw in the masterworks shown earlier, the light source is positioned not only to the side, but above the object, shining light downward and diagonally onto the sphere. The light source is shown shining down on the object from a 45-degree angle. But of course, depending on the lighting effect that you're looking for, you can move the light source so that it's shining down on your subject from further above or more off to the side. We'll talk more about reasons you might want to do this and the impact that changing the direction of the light source will have on your subject later on in this series. But for now, it's just important that you understand that there's a range of positions you can put your light source in and achieve dramatic lighting that will showcase the form and volume of your subject. Now let's take a look at the same lighting setup from above. From a bird's eye view, we can clearly see that the light once again isn't just coming directly from the side, but it's coming from a diagonal. It's positioned at about a 45-degree angle to the right of the subject. And just like before, there are a range of positions you can place your light source that will change the direction but maintain dramatic and descriptive lighting. By placing your light source within this range of positions in relationship to the subject, you'll achieve a lighting scenario that truly showcases the form and volume of your subject. Now, before you learn to render objects using light and shadow, you need to learn about value. Value is the degree of relative lightness or darkness of a color. In this course, we'll just be addressing value through black and white. But it's important to note that everything you're going to learn in this course is a prerequisite to learning how color works. You can't understand color without first understanding light. The best way to start learning about light and value is to make a value scale. To do a value scale on white paper, you'll just need a few things: a pencil, an eraser, a ruler, and of course, a white sheet of paper. In today's demonstrations, you'll see me using a black colored pencil and a kneaded eraser. The value scale we'll be working with has 5 steps. So first I'll draw the 5 boxes for our value scale. The exact size and shape of these boxes isn't important. You'll want to make them roughly the size you see me demonstrating here. Also, it's not important that each box is exactly the same size. Just do your best to get it as close as possible. Once you've drawn your 5 boxes that are all approximately the same size and shape, we're ready to begin experimenting with value. The first value I'm going to draw will be the darkest value. So in the far left box, I'll begin drawing as dark as I can. Because I'm bearing down on the tip of the pencil, I'll use the tripod grip. This allows me to focus all of the weight on the tip of the pencil and minimizes the possibility that the lead will break. This darkest value is the only value you'll see me using the tripod grip with. All other values will be done using the overhand grip. I'm trying to fill in the box as evenly and as dark as possible. To do this, I'll go over the value multiple times, each time changing the direction of the pencil strokes. The result should be a dark and even value. We'll refer to this darkest value as our number 5 value. This number 5 value will be the only time that we bear down completely on the pencil and push it to its darkest limits. It's important to remember that whether you're using white paper or toned paper, your paper will always be one of your values. Because we're using white paper, and white is the lightest possible value, our paper will stand in for our number 1 value. No drawing of the number 1 value is required. We'll just let the white of the paper shine through and establish our lightest light. Now that we have our darkest dark, our number 5 value, and our lightest light, our number 1 value, we are ready to begin filling in the middle values. I'm going to begin with the number 3 value. Here you'll see me switch to the overhand grip. You can see that this grip engages the side of the pencil instead of the tip. This allows me to lay in a soft wash of value. Later in this course, we'll explore different ways of laying down value, but for now, I'm going to recommend using this wash technique with a pencil. This technique is also referred to as graining because it exposes the grain of the paper. Just like before, you'll see me make a number of passes over the value, darkening it each time and switching the direction of the stroke each time. One of the important things to remember while working with value is that you'll rarely get it right the first time. You should expect to make a number of passes before the desired value is achieved. While starting your value scale, I would recommend leaving your values a little lighter than you think they should be. The reason is that we'll be making adjustments all the way through the value scale, and it's much easier to darken a value than it is to lighten it. Although you can lighten a value with an eraser, it tends to smear it around or lift it unevenly, so you'll want to do your best to avoid lightening a value with an eraser. So even though I know that I'll most likely have to darken our number 3 value before the value scale is finished, I'm going to move on to value number 4. Once again, you'll see me using the side of the pencil to lay down an even wash of value. I'll be pressing harder than with the number 3 value, but not as hard as I pressed with the number 5 value. And once again, I'll leave the number 4 value slightly lighter than I think it needs to be so that I can make any necessary adjustments later on in the process. Next, I'll move on to the number 2 value. All it needs is a light, even wash of value. When you're making your own value scale, I want you to pay attention to what it feels like to make each value. Pay particular attention to how much pressure you're using when making each different value. Now that we've made our first attempt at all 5 values, you can see the value scale starting to come together. Now it's time for refinement. The goal of the value scale is that there's an even transition between each step. There shouldn't appear to be any jumps in the scale. For example, take a look at the number 1 and 2 values. If you squint your eyes, you can barely see a difference between them. Compare the transition between values number 1 and 2 to the transition between values number 4 and 5. Try comparing these values with your eyes squinted or out of focus. Hopefully you can see that the jump between values 4 and 5 is much greater than the jump between values 1 and 2. This means that the jump between the number 1 and 2 values isn't great enough, and the number 2 value should be darkened since we cannot lighten the number 1 value. I'll continue making adjustments to my value scale until the jump from one value to the next seems even among all values. It'll take some time for you to become sensitive to these shifts in value, but a value scale is the perfect way to practice and sensitize your eyes and hand to these shifts. Now that I'm reasonably satisfied with my value scale, you're going to see me practice making each value underneath its corresponding box. It's critical that you become skilled at being able to make any of these values on command. You want to get the necessary pressure to make each individual value ingrained deeply into your muscle memory. Also, you'll notice that the washes I'm making underneath my value scale are going from dark to light. Underneath the 5, I'm starting off with the number 5 value, but transitioning to a number 4. Under the number 4, I'm going from 4 to 3. These smooth transitions from one value to the next are called gradations, and they'll be a critical component to your shading practice later on in the process. During your practice today, I'm going to encourage you to make these values over and over again. The goal is that before we begin applying them in drawings, they become second nature to you. Next, you'll see me go through the same process of making a value scale, but this time on toned paper. To do this, I'll be using a gray piece of paper, a ruler, a black pencil, a kneaded eraser, and a white pencil. The idea behind drawing on tone paper is that the paper provides a neutral value. We as artists get to draw both the shadow and the light. The result is striking and dramatic. By making drawings on both white paper and toned paper, you'll get a much better understanding of how light and shadow work. The value scale process is largely the same, except, of course, that we actually get to draw in the white of the number 1 value. The darkest dark will be made by bearing down on the black pencil in the number 5 box, and our lightest value will be made by bearing down on the white pencil in the number 1 box. It's important to remember that your paper will still be one of your values. You'll be able to find both dark gray and light gray papers. I'm using a lighter gray that is roughly my number 2 value. During your practice today, you may not be using the exact same value of paper that I'm using. This is a great opportunity to get a sense of what value your paper might be. To help you figure this out, compare the value of the paper to the value scale you did on white paper. Whichever value box your paper is closest to, you'll want to leave that number blank on the value scale made on your gray paper. It may need to be adjusted later on by adding either white pencil or black pencil, but once you have a rough idea of which number your paper is going to stand in for, you can begin shading in your value scale. After making a number of refinements, I still think that the jump between values number 1 and 2 is too great, and the jump between values number 2 and 3 is too small. To fix this, I'll add a small amount of white pencil into the number 2 value box. Whatever gray paper you're using will likely need adjustments, but it may not be the same kinds of adjustments you're seeing me make on my gray paper. Again, this is a great opportunity to sensitize your eyes and mind to the differences between values. And once again, once I'm satisfied with my value scale, I'll begin practicing laying down the various number of value washes. Okay, so here's your project for today. Just like you saw demonstrated, you are going to create 2 value scales. Each of your value scales is going to be 5 steps. One of your value scales is going to be done on white paper using a black pencil, and the other value scale is going to be done on gray paper using a black and white pencil. I would encourage you to watch today's demonstration as many times as you need to get a good understanding of what you should be doing for practice. Once you're happy with your value scale, I want you to practice making each individual value. You want to practice each step of the value scale until it is ingrained in your muscle memory. So if you want to draw a number 4 value, you don't have to compare it back to a value scale. You know what it feels like and looks like to put down that value. For this part of the practice, you should have a number of pages of simply laying down these basic value washes. Once you're comfortable making values 1 through 5 on both gray and white paper, you're ready to watch the next lesson. Well, I hope you enjoy your project today, and I will see you back here in the next lesson when you're going to learn about how light actually operates on our basic volumes.